Okay, so I'm here with Alejandro Rojas, who is, did I pronounce that correctly?
You did. Thank you.
I didn't roll my R's, but it was close. Um, who is in what relationship with Enigma Labs? What is your relationship with them?
I am the head of research and content with them.
So research and content, that suggests to me that there's a goal of Enigma, in terms of the mission of Enigma Labs, that the goal is both education and research. Is that correct?
Correct. And so I'm extremely happy to be able to head up what we're doing there. And I'm really excited about what we're doing on that front.
So what is, in your words, what is the mission of Enigma Labs?
I think putting it simply is we want to help facilitate the answers in this field. And so that is our big goal. Research is one of the major goals.
And what do you call the field? UFO field, UAP field, larger than that?
At Enigma Labs, just because we're working with a lot of mainstream professional kind of scientists and researchers, we use the term UAP pretty much exclusively. So I would call it, yeah, I guess UAP research.
So you're interested in facilitating answers to the looming questions in the UAP research field, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it couples really well because, of course, I'm also a board member at SCU and their public relations director. So it couples together really well.
Good. That's great. Yeah, I've noticed that a lot of people are working with more than one organization, which I think is really bodes well for collaborations across these different groups. These groups I'm noticing are really meeting different needs in the population and among scientists. So I think it's perfect.
A research need that's vital for not just what we're hearing from the DoD, but also what scientists have been saying, which is, we need a database that everybody can kind of access to be able to run analysis. And also to put it in the hands of, the end user, just everyday people to be able to look up and find out more information, submit their reports, find out who else is reporting things in the area. So it can be fun at that level. But then also all that back-end information, of course, is the stuff like people like us at SCU are looking at for to do some analysis. And so, it kind of serves both sides.
Yeah, so actually, let's go a little deeper dive. You're sort of, if we're going to talk, is Enigma Labs a for-profit or nonprofit?
It's a for-profit.
And so your customer base is everything from government and academia to private organizations and just hobbyists, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. So how do you, so this is tricky, right? So if someone is going to help people record a database of everything that's in the sky or everything that's underwater, there's some issues that are going to come up with military installations. How do you deal with that?
You mean like that it could be military in nature?
Yeah, in other words, if you're going to make available to the entire world, including Russia and China and North Korea, let's say, all of everything that's in the sky or under the water, how is that not a problem for national security?
It's a great question, and I think it's a larger question than just Enigma, because that's kind of what we all been doing in UAP research the entire time. And it's certainly a concern because I'm someone of the belief that national security is a concern and a valid concern, and that there are certainly times where information needs to be protected. So that's it's a tough balancing act. Now, as a researcher and being involved from the beginning with the SCU, I think that we've been one of the groups who have been the most effective in doing some analysis on some of the best cases. But we don't know what those are. They're UAP, they're unidentified. So we don't know. And most of the cases we've looked at have been military related. So for instance, our group, I wouldn't say Stephenville is an SCU case, but it is in the manner in which a lot of us who founded SCU were involved with that case.
Can you tell us a little bit about that case? Because I'm not familiar with that one and I'm new to the field. So, and there might be other people who aren't. Yeah.
Yeah, there probably are. So Stephenville, Texas, there was a sighting by law enforcement, a private pilot, other people in the area, civilian people of UAP. They were interesting. A couple videos were taken, and there really became kind of a media frenzy around it. With at the time, most of us that started to get involved were with MUFON. I was at the time PR director for MUFON, and so I was fielding a lot of media calls at that time. And then working with our head of research, which was Robert Powell, who's also with SCU now. And Robert was organizing some analysis, and what they were able to get was some radar data and also track on the radar the scrambling of a couple of jets that seemed to be interested in the object. The object's movements were similar to what witnesses had reported. And the biggest concern is that the object seemed to be moving towards Camp David in Texas, the president's camp. So it seemed to lose track as it was heading and getting very close to that protected airspace.
Was the president at Camp David during this time?
I don't believe he was at that time.
And what year was this?
That one was 20. I'd have to look that up. Let me look it up real quick, but it's early 2000s.
Okay. Okay, so it was sort of moving towards Camp. It seemed like it was moving towards Camp David, so it felt like it was a secure site, and there was a concern about that. Was there
2008.
any? Was there any like obvious? Okay, thanks. Was there any obvious? So that would have been Obama.
No, that was Bush.
That was Bush. Okay. Were there any obvious aggressive maneuvers, or was it just like we don't know what they're doing and we don't know who they are?
It just seemed to be moving in that direction. I wouldn't say it wasn't moving at a regular pace. It was actually, hovered. At one case, moved at great speed during one instance, using the radar data and the witness testimony. Robert and other researchers he had gathered were able to determine, some speeds that were pretty extraordinary. And so, and of course, if the president was there, it would have been a bigger deal, but it was still something moving towards, protected airspace, and it was of interest in that the jets were scrambled. So that was an interesting case. But moving on, of course, then with Aguadilla, Puerto Rico case, that was what really kind of solidified and began the SCU group.
And that was in 2017?
That one was, I feel like that was 2009.
It's okay to find these on the fly. I didn't warn you that I was going to quiz you. I'm taking notes, and I always have these questions pop into my head, and so.
Luckily, we have the internet, and I am a quick.
Yeah, you are a quick researcher.
2013.
2013
was that
okay.
one. So that one, that one was a case where some Homeland Security, Border Patrol specifically, had witnessed this object and gone to the state director in MUFON, Morgan Bial, another founder of SCU. MUFON, which makes sense, they require that at least the witness can remain anonymous to the public, but not to MUFON. But this witness wanted to be very careful with their information and wanted to remain anonymous. So we started kind of this subgroup. Morgan gathered some of us, like Robert Powell and others, and we looked into it, and eventually we started the SCU. But that was another case where, military seeing something or law enforcement. Interestingly enough, they said they brought it to their superior, and their superior said he would check with the Air Force. Air Force came back and said they didn't know what it was. So supposedly their supervisor said, Air Force doesn't know what it is. Maybe you should check with some civilian UFO researchers. So that's why they called it MUFON. Yeah, very unusual. So that's how this all got started. But yeah, again, radar data matching with witness testimony, and in this case, a FLIR video. And the analysis showed that it was moving in a strange manner, at times moving very fast. Some of the maneuvers that appear to have taken place that were highly unusual was moving underwater and out of water with no loss in speed. And then possibly at the end, looking like it's breaking into two objects. So highly unusual event.
Question. I hear a lot about moving into water and out of water without any loss of speed. To me, that's there could be ways to manage that. But what is there? Can you hear the sound of the waves around it when it's coming out of the water or going into the water?
In this case, there was no instrumentation in the area to record anything like that, nor witnesses. It was at a distance. Essentially, the movement was that these Border Patrol were taking off, coming out of the airport Aguadilla, and they were coming around like this. As they were flying, they saw out in the water a light, some light moving. So they trained their FLIR on it. Luckily, the light turned off, but they were able to capture it on their FLIR and then follow the object. The object seemed to come in from the water, kind of circle the airport, and then go back out into the water, and then go underwater at one point before they lost track of it. So they were lucky to get that FLIR video.
They were, but it's interesting that the law enforcement / military people said, hey, check with some civilian UFO groups, because it occurs to me, if that's not a military thing, or if it's a secret military thing, or if it's a private industry thing. In other words, if it's a human-made piece of technology that the military or law enforcement sees but doesn't know about, maybe they're hoping to get some help with. I mean, you know what I mean? I guess I sort of wonder. I mean, so it sounds like it's not that in that particular case, you're certainly not risking national security because they're telling you to go do this thing.
Exactly.
But it makes me wonder. Does it make you wonder?
And this is why it gets back to the question that you're asking. Because again, then, you know, the other report coming from SCU that's been very popular has been the Nimitz report, which is strange because that's a Navy case, but they haven't released any of their data or analysis. There's been one kind of summary that was leaked by George Knapp, and I believe that to be real. And people who are familiar with the case and the research that's been done inside the military, like Luis Elizondo, who ran that Pentagon project, have confirmed that was a real analysis. In fact, many suspect that that was written by the guy who eventually became the head of the UAP task force, Stratton, which is possible. We haven't confirmed that. But either way, Elizondo confirms it was written by the military for the military. But that doesn't analysis kind of, it was a summary of the events coupled with witness testimony. But what SCU did was take that further to analyze the data to figure out speeds, velocities, G-forces that were at play, which were all highly unusual and for any aircraft or propulsion that we're aware of. But the point being that, you know, yeah, this is a military itself, you know, who is running it past the Air Force, or in the Nimitz case, not really, we don't know who they ran it up against. But in both cases, I don't know that, you know, on our end, especially, we can be certain that it's not ours or someone else's. So is it something that should be information that is protected? And it's a big gray area, I think. So I think with the field and what we do, it's an issue that hasn't necessarily been tackled. I think it's one of the elephants in the room where I think the DoD, like in the hearings that we saw, don't want to speak to things at that level. I mean, they do talk about the need for secrecy, but we haven't, you know, it hasn't gotten specific. And that's going to be a tough area, because I would think if I was running a UAP program, or let's say I was a foreign technology division for the Air Force, I wouldn't want to rule out anything as being Chinese or Russian unless I knew 100% that it was not Chinese or Russian.
Yeah.
And that you would think would be a pretty high bar.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to know anything 100%, frankly, at this point.
Yeah. So especially right now, I think the question that you ask is important. I'm sure there's people in the government that are asking those questions, but I don't know. It's not a question we've all collectively answered yet, or really anybody's kind of necessarily addressed. I guess we just move forward with our best faith And we haven't at SCU or when I was with MUFON or any organization I've been associated with, we haven't been approached by the government to say, hey, we would like you to kind of maybe
shut it
we can
down over
confirm,
here.
yeah, we can confirm that is not an that is man-made. So let's shut that down, which is a good point also to that recent news.
Well, I don't think they
was,
would do that. I mean, that would be akin to admitting that. I mean,
I
like
know.
that would not be the right thing to do either, right?
Yeah, so it's really difficult. These are the real sensitive and difficult areas that are still kind of outstanding in all of this.
Yeah, I feel like there's got to be a way because it's such a public service to try to explain what the heck is going on, and people want to get involved, and it's a chance to me. It's like an exciting opportunity for citizen scientists to go get involved and look at what's in the sky and what's in the ocean. So maybe there has to be a conversation about, like, obviously it's our planet, we can look anywhere, but maybe we have a way to figure out, like, what we say, okay, this is going to go in the pile of national security. It doesn't mean it's human made. I don't know. I don't know how to do it. Obviously, I don't know how to do it. But like, it's
really
a hard question.
Yeah, I would like to hear your opinion on this too. You know, if they chose, which would make sense, kind of to your earlier point, just not to speak on it. Let us believe that it's unidentified, even though they know it is identified. Maybe that would be their best tactic. In that case, then we're working with faulty data and they know that, but they're kind of, their hands are tied a bit.
Well,
you know?
yeah, right. Like, if I were, I'm just imagining myself, if I were in that community and I was like, well, what am I going to say? I'm not going to call them up and say, hey, don't look at this. Because then it's like, oh, something, don't look at this. What? It's already up. Two, I'm not going to call them up and say, hey, let's make a deal where you don't look, in the north direction and on the 42nd parallel at this day. Like, no, obviously, like, that's not going to work. And so, I think that I feel like you are in a bind if you're in that position. And I also feel like it's a discussion that you could actually have. Like, you could literally come out and say, so of course we have secret aerospace programs. And of course, we're not going to tell you whether something's a secret aerospace program or not.
Right.
And there's a reason and maybe there's a reason the intelligence community in the Pentagon says, actually, we really don't know what these things are. We're trying to tell you we don't know what these things are, but you're not listening because you think that we might know what these things are. And for some reason want to motivate, like maybe motivate funding or whatever it is. I mean, there's a whole theory that you could motivate a bunch of funding that way. So,
and it also, I think, answers the question, why does intelligence drag their feet? Why do they not want to do this? These questions that we're talking about right now, I think would justify them being hesitant to go there at all.
Sure. Trying to keep people safe, even though it's frustrating. And frankly, having a bunch of people interested in science and trying to understand something that's unknown, you can train a whole generation of scientists that way. Even if the thing that they're trying to understand turns out to be known, you've still got people interested in what's going on in the sky and stuff. So anyway, I think that everyone's doing the best they can to try to figure out how to manage this. And it does seem like there's something that's unexplained. Otherwise, I think it would have been much harder for them to, well, I don't know, who knows who's in Congress and what they would believe, but it feels like it would have been much harder for them to motivate the response that they're getting if there wasn't some kind of information that was like slam dunk. I don't know. All I know is, like, I cross my fingers that it's going to be fine.
Yeah. So I guess the answer to that question would be, because I don't want people to feel like I'm trying to talk around it or anything.
You're not.
The
You're
answer
being very clear.
Yeah, I think it's just, we're business as usual. We're acting in the same manner as science is traditionally acted with this field.
Yeah, act as scientists, and then maybe that will spur the secret programs to get more secretive and do a better job of cloaking their devices.
Yeah, right.
Right? It's like, we can see you, so now what?
Yeah.
All right, cool. So that brings us actually to the next question, which is, we kind of did a deep dive on that one. We probably won't do as deep a dive on these other ones. I don't know, maybe we will. But what kind of UAP related data does Enigma Labs work with? So are you like MUFON, except for more sophisticated or less sophisticated, or are you like CUFOS, or are you like Galileo Project? Are you like your own thing? So what is your deal?
I would say we're kind of like all of those, but a little more sophisticated on the data end. For instance, I would say Galileo is moving towards being more sophisticated on the telemetry end, and data gathering, which is wonderful. Same with UAPX, and some of the projects within SCU. But what we're looking at are more of the databases, partnering up with database owners, taking that information and putting it in a database that is formatted in a manner in which scientists can work with it, and researchers across the board. And the data we're hoping to gather, or that we're working on, gathering, it's the same data everybody else has. Well, the data that's out there, it's not all really congregated in one place that's accessible, and that's what we hope to do. So that way we can aid in historical research, but we also will be gathering new information. So hopefully we can make some partnerships, and so far everything's looking very positive in that way, to be able to gather new information from other reporting centers, but also to be our own reporting center to gather citing information as well. And then being as transparent as possible. And when it comes to science, you have to be extremely transparent, which we are all about, to share that information in a manner where people can use that information to its best. So I think we're going to be able to provide a lot of tools for researchers to make some really interesting discoveries.
Okay, so I'm imagining, you're going to MUFON, you're going to CUFOS, you're going to all these places that have just tons of archive data. You're putting them into some kind of database that's consistent, has the same fields across all of these. Maybe they're not all complete, but at least they're consistent, so you can do machine learning or something on it. How is it that Enigma Labs plans to make money? Is it like a paid research project, or how does that go?
Yeah, I would say it's more along the lines of, there'll be data sets, there'll be a lot that is free. Like a lot of the apps out there where, you'll be able to look at all this information and search it. And the other side of what I'm doing is the content side, the education side. So I've got a lot of freelancers that I've got writing articles that are serious and comprehensive about this topic. And so they'll be able to access all of that information. In fact, we're going to have a lot of that up on our website sooner rather than later, hopefully in the next month or so. Nice. And so we'll be providing a lot of that information for free. There'll be upper level things on the app that will be paid. Then when it comes to data access, any data, the raw data that we acquire, we want to pass on, so everybody can download that and use it as they wish. But then the data that we kind of scrub and
sure, you're basically your analysis, your analyzed data.
That sort of stuff. When it comes to we'll have an API, and API access will probably also be one of the charge kind of areas. So depending on what kind of, it gets kind of complicated. We've got on our website some details if people want to see that, and how we're going to optimize that data at different levels. But there'll be an API where researchers will be able to make their own custom tools as well.
Have you looked at Factal, the tool Factal, FACTAL?
It sounds really familiar. But
it's a really great intelligence tool. Anyway, I don't want to give an ad for them, but basically you might consider looking at the way they lay out the sort of their dashboard for anyone who's interested in getting intelligence around the world, because you could do something similar, and I think it's like they've solved that problem in a nice way. So
I'll definitely check that out.
But yeah, okay, this sounds exciting. So, but no one will ever, just let me make sure this is clear. No one's ever going to have to pay, right, to make a report.
No.
Right. Okay. So you're not going to have a system where you have someone shooting plates up into the sky, and then Enigma makes money because you're like, oh, I made a report. Okay, good. So the kind of data that you're working with are visual, sounds like, auditory if they have a video. Mm-hmm. Do you also work with radar and electromagnetic data sets?
So yeah, we've been in discussions with UAPX and Galileo, or we've talked with them, and about our goals to eventually be able to ingest that sort of information. So phase one will be the simple rollout where people will be able to see all the sightings and report. But later phases, we want to work with them to be able to incorporate that data so that, if you have a sighting and there's a Galileo station nearby, you can also be like, holy cow, these people captured the same thing I got. So you could let a Galileo know, and they know about your sighting, so they can incorporate that in their data. But then hopefully you'll be able to also see, some of the other telemetry that they gathered. So we're still in the works on all of that, but so far we've established relationships and everybody's really positive about that.
Cool. And there's a guy who I talked to, that's really neat. And there's a guy who I talked to who builds his own, he's like a one-person shop, but he works with SCU. Gosh, I just talked to him yesterday.
Maybe Peter Davenport?
No. He builds these boxes with like pan tilt cameras, and now I'm gonna have to go look at my notes. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Let's go. Yeah. Let's do this right.
I'm sure I probably know who he is. But,
you do.
Most of the groups I know doing that sort of thing are kind of groups. But
it's Ronald, the data acquisition project guy.
Okay.
Is it Ron? Yeah, it's Ron. Yeah, so do you know what I'm talking about? He builds like these systems.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's an example of having like visual, auditory, radar, electromagnetic on there. But you're saying Galileo Project is also doing that, and
UAPX and other groups too.
Got it. Okay, what other groups? Let's write them down.
Well, off the top of my head, I can think of Sky-Hub, although I don't know where their status is right now.
Wasn't that off of a podcast? I heard about that from it was created from a podcast or something, wasn't it?
I don't know about that. I know there's a group of software guys who got together and created that, and then also worked on the hardware to standardize it so people could either go buy the parts and build their own kits or purchase the kits from the group.
Right.
I don't know that they got as far as to be able to sell the units, but and I think they've kind of slowed down, maybe even stalled a bit right now. But another one, of course, that wanted to do something similar, which is also stalled, is UFOTOG, UFOTOG. That was a partnership between Mark D'Antonio, who is MUFON's photo and video analyst, and my favorite sci-fi or special effects, Doug Trumbull. But Doug Trumbull just passed away in the last year. So I think that's probably gotten stalled. Doug Trumbull did the special effects for like Close Encounters, and
he'd be a great guy to have around to look for fakes.
Yeah. So Close Encounters was a good one, and he really got into the topic, and he built this kind of like UAPX McGowan, this big truck with all kinds of cameras and everything on it. But yeah, he worked on Blade Runner and Aliens.
Wow.
All my favorite movies when I was growing up.
Wow, yeah, me too. Wow, that's amazing. Okay, so sorry for that, a little bit of a more deep dive. I like to archive this stuff too, because, who knows? It's good to capture all this information.
Yeah.
So, okay, so given this is the kind of data that you look at, which is kind of like everything you can get and stick in the database, paint for me a picture for you and for, I don't know if you could speak for all of Enigma Labs, but maybe you can. What would be the best, like if someone handed you a case and said, this is a slam dunk, this is clearly a UFO, what would that evidence look like? Like what would have to be true about that evidence?
Well, we're still completely working on details, and we're working with research partners. And here's what I mean by that. What we're going to have is a confidence score. So we're going to be using machine learning to look over these cases and give a confidence score. And we're going to be very transparent about how that's factored. And, open to changes as time goes on, because I think that that's something that will be important going forward, and a lot of groups will be looking at. I think that fortunately, many are kind of looking to see how successful we are with it and where we go with it. And I think we're pretty confident that we've got a lot of data scientists working on this. So some of the things that it's looking at are the number of witnesses, how close and large the size of the object, the quality of the witnesses. In other words, are they law enforcement or military, that sort of thing. What was gathered. So for instance, if radar information was gathered, that's going to count for a lot. And then, however, we're also going to be overlaying. So to your point, satellites in the area, military facilities in the area, which can be a plus and a negative. So for instance, military in the area may, bring down a score, but at the same time, that then kind of affects if you're doing research to find out if military facilities are having more UAP occurrences, which is something like the Intentions Project is doing with SCU, where they're looking at nuclear facilities.
Yeah.
So, so that can be kind of tricky. So there's things to work out, I guess.
Yeah.
But the great thing is you also have the ability to turn on and off filters. It's not necessarily going to affect the score, but if you're like, okay, how many UAP sightings are actually happening around this military facility? You can turn off that filter, gather that, and then someone else can do the deep dive into those cases to figure out what's going on there.
So actually, because no one knows the answer to that question of what is the right, what really is the best? Is that what you're about to say? Sorry.
No, I forgot. I'm sorry. I was listening.
Sorry.
I was listening intently. No, that's okay. That's okay. It was not that big of a deal.
Okay, but backing up, and maybe this will remind you of it. Backing up, it sounds like you're going to be working with sort of incoming data, and your piece is as we talked about, is kind of the analysis and then making this kind of analysis available. And then people could figure out what happens to the data set. How many of these incoming cases are sort of called unidentified or of interest or whatever, depending on how these factors are set. So you could actually run like machine learning on the machine learning to set those variables, right? And do some really interesting reports. That would be cool. Sorry. Yeah, I just got excited.
We're excited. No, we're excited too. I'm really excited. And I think it's really the next step. And I think that's where a lot of the people looking into do some real data scrubbing or even collection of reports, their idea is, they can't do what we did at SCU. We looked at those cases one by one, had someone manually scrub those to find the best cases that we're using for analysis at SCU. But that took like a year or two. That took a very long time. So what everybody else is looking at is, we really need to teach machines to do this. And so that's what we're tackling. And of course, we've got a lot of data scientists, so they're 100% certain that it can be done. Others, more traditional researchers, are skeptical. So that'll be a hurdle for us. And what the great thing is, we'll have some data to match it up against to figure out, the similarities or differences. And then luckily groups like SU have been very good at, recording how they did, why. So we'll be able to match it up and see where these and why these discrepancies happen to, benefit everyone.
That's really great. And it sounds like you'll be, when I talked with Avi Loeb, he was saying that he'll be getting this data in and doing machine learning on it. Is that in partnership with you, or are they doing their own machine learning over there?
I don't know that. I can't say for sure, to be honest. They haven't explicitly said that they're going to just use us. Perhaps they're in a wait and see kind of thing. Let's see if they can do it. If not, we'll do it ourselves type of thing, which would make sense. But we've certainly, we do have a relationship and have expressed our interest in helping them do that.
That's cool. All right, that's exciting. Okay, so zooming along, this is a really fun conversation because there's a lot of meat here. What kinds of explanations for UAP reports and data does your organization tend to examine? In other words, are you interested in explanations like meteors? Are you interested in satellites? Are you interested in, as we mentioned, classified weapon systems? Are you interested only in ferreting all those out and finding truly unidentified? So yeah, is the interest only in the unidentified piece? And if so, what is the explanation for that? Like, what do you tend to go for, like extraterrestrials or time travel, or what's your story?
No, we're neutral where we don't have a predisposed idea.
Yeah.
And that we don't know. To us, they're UAP, they're unidentified, and we don't know. That's what we hope to discover. So that's kind of where we stand, similar to the other kind of science-minded groups.
Yeah.
And so that's where we stand. So we want to gather all the information, because I think that's been really important. For instance, if we see a lot of sightings, because there's a difference between sighting reports and a UAP. So for instance, the government has defined UAP to be something that has been investigated. It's still not identified, and it's been determined to be not man-made.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a pretty high bar, but
Yeah.
as it should be. So we'd be in that kind of we're not necessarily, our cases aren't going to be investigated. Our machine learning is going to give a confidence score. So the sort of analysis we would be able to do then would be kind of trending on the high confidence cases, which hopefully would give us an idea about actual UAP characteristics. However, there's still an importance to all the sightings. I think there's an importance to seeing sighting trends. So for instance, the type of things that can tell us is when there's a very popular UFO show or movie or documentary, do we see trends? Historically in MUFON, we do see trends. We do see an increase in reports. So that's important. In an area, an example I was talking about with the group earlier today actually was in the UK, they have this festival where they do this kind of burning of something. I forget the details, but it creates this smoke ring. That's this black ring. And every year they get UAP reports. Mm-hmm. So trending things like that, where you can see, okay, every year during this festival, you see these UAP reports. We all know, don't get too excited, when you see that sort of thing. So I think the social side of how and why UAP reports come in is also really important.
So you're saying you could get at that by looking at the number of reports, regardless of whether they're UAPs. You look both ends of the spectrum. It sounds like the number of reports, regardless of whatever the additional confidence interval is. And then when you find the confidence interval, the ones that are high confidence for UAP, then you can look at what are the features of these.
Right. And, hotspots is another big one. So for instance, the media hasn't really gotten that. UFO sighting reports does not equal more UAP.
Right.
Typically, and what we've seen, those of us who've been doing this for a long time, is that there's a high correlation with population. So when you put it up against population, that's where you find where the real hot spots are. Typically states in the Southwest, actually, like Colorado, Arizona, are two of the big ones. So why is that? We can speculate that, and my personal speculation is that those are warmer states, people are outside a lot, and they also have military bases. But researchers can kind of do further kind of correlation, statistical analysis to find out, are those true? What really do drive those sighting reports? And I think a lot of people, especially more sociologically minded people, will be interested in that sort of data.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Cool. All right. Thank you for you're just very thorough with your answers and thoughtful, and it's wonderful. And thanks. I know we have to close soon, but at the same time, these last two questions are I think, really important. So what could you imagine your organization focusing on in the future? I know Enigma Labs is a relatively new organization. When were you founded again?
Technically founded, I mean, the idea and some thoughts got started about over a year ago, but we've only really kind of hit the ground and are really running in the last 6 months or so.
So let's say you actually kind of founded in 2021, sort of, but officially in 2022.
I think that's right. Yeah.
Right. So your future is most of what you have ahead of you in terms of, and your most of what you have in terms of your timeline. So now that people are talking about UFOs more, UAPs, we've got private industry, you've got academia, you've got the lay citizenry, and you've got government. What do you imagine changing or moving? Like, give me a fantasy of the future in the best case scenario for you.
Yeah, best case scenario is that, we're a robust reporting center where people are getting on their app and reporting, and that we are working with other reporting centers and partners to also get their data to be viewable and accessible through our database. And that, all of those organizations that you're talking about, whether they be academia, governmental, or even your private researcher, some of the best research comes from just people at home on their off time, that we can provide tools for all of those people to do research and make discovery, and also for us to be able to make discoveries. So for example, one of the things that I know it's been a goal for a lot of us is to be able to have an app where people can be notified, hey, somebody's seeing a UAP in your area. So people can go outside, take some pictures, potentially see the thing. Depending on their locations, we can triangulate and make some determinations about that. If we're lucky enough to have some other telemetry in the area, whether that be radar or a mobile unit, that, once those get rolled out, that we'll be able to gather more information. We'll be able to identify cases where we've got an abundance of data to be able to make some, determinations around what's going on or what the object is. And then hopefully even go further than that and trend similar cases, so we can start to figure out, if there are, what is going on, and hopefully identify some of these things. I'm excited about identifying mundane things, even if they are like UAPX on that tear in the sky seem to have potentially identified a weather anomaly. To me, that's pretty exciting. They're discovering, that's science, making a discovery that nobody knew about before. So I'm excited about even those types of discoveries that will be happening. But of course, the big one is, what's really going on with UAP, and it would be exciting. If the mystery persists, it's exciting, but whatever that answer would be, I try to be very careful to follow the data and not prejudice myself. And I think that when we look especially at astrophysics and astronomy, a lot of those discoveries, if not the majority of them that we make in space, are things we never predicted. They're very different than we thought they would be. And I think that because of that, that's an example of why we have to be open to following the data.
I agree. If someone wanted to, before I get to the last question, just it occurred to me that someone might hear what you just said and say, wait, what's your app? Tell me where I can go get your app. Is your app available yet, or will it be available, and how could people learn about it?
It's not available yet. We're shooting to have it available by the end of the year. We are starting beta testing soon, and we'll be entering people in beta in waves. So you certainly can get on our email list if you would like. And our website is enigmalabs.io.
Okay, enigmalabs.io. So that gets you on the website, and maybe, you might be selecting people to beta test the app.
Yes. So, and that will get you into the app where you can read more about us and what we're up to, even some technical data about how we plan to do it. We'll, all of these lofty things that we are looking to do. But also, we'll have more blog posts up soon to give more detail around like how we're going to be scoring and those sort of things, and how that scoring's going. Mm-hmm. And even some like analysis in that we do have, data scientists. So they're itching at, kind of sharing what they're seeing in some of the data. Mm-hmm. So we'll have some blog posts along those lines. And then and within the next few weeks, we'll have, a ton of UAP articles, kind of like we call it a UAP library, but it's almost like a Wikipedia in a lot of cases. And I think people are really going to appreciate them because we've got great writers, most of whom have written about this topic before, and they're great researchers. And I think they're going to be more comprehensive than anything that's really out there. So they'll be able to not only read what we've written, but have a robust resource sections where you can do a lot more research beyond what we're introducing.
That's great. You have not at the last question yet. I'm going to tell you the last question. The last question is, what would get in the way of this hopeful future, and how would you mitigate that? Because that's a great future. But before I get there, quick question, and maybe this relates to what would get in the way. How are you funded? You're able to hire data scientists, unless they're all volunteers. Are you funded through the Galileo project, or are you allowed to say how you're funded?
Independent funding. So we have investors.
Investors. Got it. Okay, so what would get in the way of this great vision you have, which I am totally on board with and I'm excited about, and I know you are, and what can you do to mitigate that? Or what could anyone do? What could NASA do? What could anyone who's interested in seeing this happen, what could they do to help mitigate that?
I think looking at the hurdles, it's funny because I kind of smiled, because now that you've asked me this question, if you would have asked me this question even a month ago, I would have had a lot of things on this list. But the good thing is that we've got a great team, and luckily the research community has been very helpful and open. So I think we've been able to get past a lot of potential hurdles. So especially now that we're getting so close to launching our beta, things are coming together really, really well. I would say some of the things that could hurt are maybe some organizations not wanting to cooperate, but thus far, luckily, that's not an issue. Everybody's being very cooperative. So how can, and then otherwise, I guess it's also going to be, once we do launch, getting feedback, and also, I guess their concern will be how we react to feedback. And I think that we're going to be very open to feedback. I'm got a lot of faith in my group.
And I think you're going in the right direction. So it sounds really good. And do you hire people? If someone wanted to be part of their team, should they just go to your website?
We do, definitely. In fact, a lot of, our authors are people who have come forward and say, hey, I'm a journalist. I've written about this stuff, and I'd like to write with you guys. Some of whom I'm already familiar with. So I'm like, yeah, no problem. That's great. Hey, it's Alejandro. And so, so yeah, definitely. We do have spots open, and there is a preference, I would say, to people who are interested in this field. We definitely want to talk to those people and interview them first. We're also, of course, looking for people with expertise, because, there's a lot of people with excellent expertise that are interested in this topic. Looking at our membership at ACU proves that. So yeah, I think that if people are interested, definitely contact us, and we'll see what we can work out.
Cool. All right. Those are all my questions. You've done an amazing job being transparent.
Thank you.
Thinking with me about these weird things. And
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, they're great questions. And I think that, they're the pertinent questions, and they're the tough questions that are going to need to be considered at some point as we work through this all, especially as we start to work with government. And the great thing is, if I could speak to it real quick, was that
yes, please.
You mentioned earlier the cooperation. And, there's a lot of cross-pollination between all of these groups, but it's extremely helpful. I think what's great, and what I'm really proud of SCU being able to do, is to help facilitate all of these groups coming together. Governmental agencies, scientists and researchers from the public sector coming together to meet and mingle and work together and say, hey, I like your project. I want to work with you too. And so we've got a lot of that going on. And I think that can only help. And I hope that, siloing doesn't start to happen, but it's not right now. And I think that's a really good thing. And it speaks positively towards our community. I think people with NASA, now that they're getting involved and looking at all of this, and others, I think that it speaks to our professionalism that we all do work together like that.
Yeah, I think it's amazing. I mean, that's basically the theme of the article I'm writing, which is like, look at these
Mm.
people, look what they've done with very little resources, with a lot of stigma and a long history
Yeah,
of being ignored, you know.
yeah.
This
I
is
know that Alex, especially, and others are really floored. You know, they're like, when I introduce them to all of these researchers, and they're like, wow, you know, these people have put their credibility and reputation on the line to do this for decades and being made fun of. And, you know, I think a lot of people who are only just coming into this topic are like, you know, I was the person 5 years ago who would have made fun of these guys. And now
yeah.
I'm like in awe that they were able to be strong enough to push forward despite that and work in this arena.
Yeah, yeah, it really bodes well for the future of this field. Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome.